and today I'm here to bring you my August wrap up. I read 7 books in the month of August. I also DNF'd 3, which is really big for me because I never DNF books. I'm lucky if I DNF 1 or 2 in the whole year. I always push through. But this month, at the end of the month, I just wasn't feeling it. But let's just jump right in, starting with the books that I actually did finish. The first book that I read in the month of August, I read during the Booktubeathon, and that was Far From the Tree by Robin Benway. This one follows 3 biological siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, who were separated when they were children or at birth, and they were each individually adopted or put into foster care. And they just recently found out about each other, and they're coming together. This book was all about family bonds, family ties, and sort of finding out who your family is. It was cute. I gave it a 4 stars. I'm not a huge YA contemporary fan, so I found it cute for what it was. There were definitely parts in here that nearly made me cry, which is commendable because I don't cry very often in books. So I liked it. It, again, not particularly my cup of tea, but it was good for what it was. The next book that I completed was an adult contemporary, and that was The Last Days of Rabbit Hayes by Anna McPartlin. This one follows a girl named Rabbit Hayes who is terminally ill, and she is dying of cancer. She's sent to a nursing home for the terminally ill, and there she lives out her last days, and we find out all about her family. I really loved this one. If I'm comparing this one to Far From the Tree, I would definitely prefer this one because I feel like the family dynamics were so much better. I fell in love with all these characters. It did take me a minute to sort of figure out who was who because there's a lot of characters and a lot of family-friend relationships going on here, so it was a bit tricky to figure out which character belongs with which character. But once I did, I flew through the story. I absolutely loved it. It was one of my favorite contemporaries of the year, and I gave it a 5 stars. Next up, I read a short children's story, and that was The Curvy Tree by Colfer. This is one of the short stories that goes along with the Land of Stories series. I read the first book, The Wishing Spell. I have a spoiler review on it if in case you're interested. So I wanted to do some of the short stories because the second book isn't available on audio at the moment for me. I love listening to the first one on audio. I was hoping to listen to the second one on audio, but so I figured to hold me over, I would read the short story. This was really short. It was like children's story. It couldn't have been more than 30 pages because it was 5 minutes long. In the first Land of Story book, Alex and Connor, who are our main characters, Dad had told them a story in the past about a curvy tree and being unique, and so that is essentially that story. I enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars. I kind of wanted more. I don't know what I was expecting from it, but I didn't expect it to be quite so short, but it was cute. Another book that I was supposed to read for the Booktubeathon that I only got halfway through during the Booktubeathon, so I read the other half after the Booktubeathon, was A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa. Tahir. Guys, I finally did it! I've been saying that I need to read this book for over a year now, and I actually did, and it got a 5 stars. It was fantastic. This is the sequel to the first book, An Ember in the Ashes. I can't talk too much about this book, but An Ember in the Ashes follows a girl named Laya, and Laya's brother is captured by a mask, and a mask is essentially a soldier who has this sort of special metal mask that he wears, and they are like the most brutal of brutal assassins. They're nightmare worthy, let's just put it that way. And so she is off to save her brother. She gets mixed up in the Resistance, and the Resistance put her on a path where she meets Alias, who is our other perspective that we're hearing the story from. And Alias is a mask, but he's not really happy with how things are going in the Empire. And so this story follows their whole path. I can't tell you anything else without making that book spoilery. I love this book. Like I said, I give it a 5 stars. The first half was really tough for me to get into. I think part of it had to do with I couldn't really remember how the first book ended because I read it almost 2 years ago. So I had to read a recap, and then with all the Booktubeathon stuff I was really busy, so I think that was it. But the second half I flew through. I loved it. I thought it was a great sequel. I cannot wait to read A Reaper at the Gates. Next up was a book I was sent by the author for review, and that was Wildcat by JP Harker. I do have a spoiler-free speed review for this already up. I will leave a link for you up here and in the description box in case you missed it. This one is a story that is inspired by Iron Age Wales and Imperial Rome, and it follows a girl named Rhea. Rhea is a part of the Cateran tribe, and in this tribe, among other things, men and women are treated equally when it comes to warfare. Men and women fight together, and Rhea is very happy that she can participate in defending her tribe. After Rhea gets married and she finds out that she's expecting a child, she finds out that her tribe is being attacked by the ever-expanding Gaian Empire, and so she decides that she will have one last battle before motherhood. The only problem is her tribe is more or less wiped out on the battlefield. Without giving too much more away, because this book does get spoilery pretty quickly, Rhea is essentially put on a path where she may be able to bridge the gap between these two empires in the future. Because of its influence of Iron Age Wales and Imperial Rome, this book does for the most part read like historical fiction. There are fantastical elements in it, there is definitely a magic system in it, but it's sort of realistic and down to earth. It's not this crazy, as of this point in the series anyway, this crazy sort of unrealistic magic that you often find in fantasy books. This was more like shaman magic, which sort of fits in with the tribe, and I really enjoyed it. I was flabbergasted by this book. I gave it a 4.75 stars, and it is the reason for the other 3 books that I DNF'd. After I was finished with this book, I had to put everything else down because nothing else was comparing, and it wasn't fair to the other books. I just wasn't in the mood for them because all I wanted was to get back into this world. Go check out my review if you want to know more information. If you're like me and you love supporting indie authors and you like historical fiction and or fantasy, I would definitely recommend these series because it was so good and so immersive. Despite the length, it was quite a lengthy book, but so immersive that I absolutely loved it. In fact, I loved it so much that I requested the next 2 books in the series, and the author was so kind to send them to me. So I now have Leaping Wolf and Lion Cub by JP Harker. These are books 2 and 3 of the Kaladin saga, and they are huge. I'm having a hard time sticking to my September TBR and not picking up these books because I want to get into this world. Next up is the last book to the Themis Files, Only Human by Sylvain Neuvel. I've been listening to these books 1 month since June. I like this book well enough. My favorite book is definitely the second book. I feel like lately my favorite book in series have been the second books, but this one was a good conclusion. It didn't captivate me quite as much as the first 2 books. The first book, Sleeping Giants, is about a woman named Rose who, when she was a child, fell into the hand of this giant robot, and now so many years later she's an adult and they're trying to build this robot and figure out where it came from. They find out that it comes from outer space, and it's this whole saga that I can't even get into. The series on a whole was really good. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it, but this book, I did give it a 4 stars. It was good, but it wasn't my favorite. And the last book that I actually completed in August was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. Are you proud of me? Another book, 2 for 2, another book that I have been on my TBRs for so long now that I had absolutely no excuse for not reading, that I finally read. This one obviously got a 5 stars. The Hate You Give is inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, and it follows a girl named Star, and Star is a black teenager who comes from a black neighborhood, but she attends a black school, and she has this whole inner war of who she needs to be and how she fits into both of her communities, until one day one of her best friends is shot and murdered by a police officer for no reason. It follows Star's struggle through her 2 communities and just warring with herself of how she should handle this situation. It was really good. It got a 5 stars. It was one of the books that was really hyped up. It definitely lived up to the hype. And now quickly I want to mention the 3 books that I DNF'd. One of them I will absolutely not be reading. I just didn't like it. The other 2 I might give another chance at some later point. The first one is The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. This one follows a unicorn who is essentially the only other unicorn there is as far as she knows. She hears that she's the only unicorn left, and she goes to find out if that's actually true. I ended up DNFing this one because it was very slow. It was an older book. It was interesting, but it was slow, and it wasn't holding my attention, which was unfair for the book because then I couldn't really get everything out of it that the author intended me to because I wasn't paying attention. So I decided to DNF it, maybe put it out for a later time. I had mentioned in another video that my daughter might actually enjoy reading this book with me, so we might do it together. I don't know, but for now, it's a DNF. The other book that I DNF'd that I probably will pick up at another point, I was reading for the Bookshop-a-thon, and that is Wicked Like a Wildfire by Lana Popovic. I got about halfway through this book. This is sort of a magical realism. I think that's the best way that I can describe it. And I am not a huge fan. Like, if you like Ava Lavender, Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender, you will like this book. I didn't like Ava Lavender, so I am not 100% enjoying this book. I'm interested in it enough to potentially continue, but I didn't finish it right at the beginning of September, and in September I'm doing sequel September, so I decided to put it aside, maybe read it in October or November if I can bring myself to it. The last book I DNF'd in the month of August was another book for the Bookshop-a-thon. I feel like my Bookshop-a-thon picks this year weren't that great. I don't know, I think it had to do with the Wildcat, but the last book that I DNF'd I will definitely not be reading because I just didn't like it, and that was When I Hit You by Mina Kandasami. This book is, I think, a nonfiction. I still don't know. I should probably research it. But anyway, it's about a woman who is abused by her husband, and this was on the short list for a couple of prizes, so I had expected it to be really good. It was really dry. It was repetitive, it was very dry, and it sort of hung on things that I wasn't really interested in. I gave it 200 pages. I read almost more than half, but I couldn't do it anymore, so I DNF'd it. I'm sorry if this was one of your favorite books. I know that domestic violence is a very important topic and we should be reading about it, we should be talking about it, but this book just wasn't for me. So those are all the books that I read and didn't finish in the month of August. Let me know down below what your favorite book was that you read in the month of August. If you enjoyed this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you have not yet, I'd love for you to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Bye!